The academy's high walls loomed above Ivy Walker like a fortress. The cold, obsidian spires stretched impossibly high, scraping against a pale orange sky, their jagged edges like the teeth of some ancient predator. This was no ordinary institution, this was the Dominion Academy, where the galaxy's most elite forces were forged. Here, the strongest were revered, and the weak were forgotten. And Ivy? She was the only human in a sea of aliens, constantly fighting for the most basic recognition. She felt the sharp, metallic taste of fear in her mouth every time she stepped onto the grounds, but she swallowed it down. Ivy was used to fear, it was her constant companion. She had never been welcome in places like this. The aliens saw her as an oddity, a curiosity to be either pitied or mocked. It was no surprise, then, when Khor-Drak, the Academy's star cadet, made her his target. Khor-Drak was a nightmare in physical form. At over 7 feet tall, his reptilian body was adorned with layers of thick, armored scales, and his eyes gleamed like twin suns. His strength was legendary, his mind sharp, and his cruelty unmatched. The other cadets followed his lead, and Ivy quickly became their favorite form of entertainment. She was the perfect victim. Young, weak, human. "Hey, Walker!" Khor-Drak's voice cut through the silence of the courtyard. Ivy tensed, her body stiffening like a steel rod. She didn't have to turn around to know he was there. His presence was like an oppressive storm. Slowly, she glanced over her shoulder, meeting the eyes of the alien bully. A grin spread across his face, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. Around him, his followers snickered, their laughter echoing in the chill air. Ivy stood frozen, the familiar sting of humiliation burning deep. "You're looking weak today, Walker," Khor-Drak sneered, stepping closer, his massive frame casting a shadow over her. "Didn't get enough sleep? Or is it that you're just hopeless?" Ivy clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. Every instinct in her screamed to run, to avoid the confrontation, but she couldn't. She wouldn't let him make her shrink. "Not this time." "I'm not afraid of you," Ivy said through gritted teeth. Her voice was steady, but the tremor in her chest betrayed her. Khor-Drak's laughter boomed louder. "Afraid? Of a pathetic human like you?" His voice was dripping with mockery. "You should be. You're nothing but a fragile little thing in a world built on strength. You'll never be one of us." Ivy bit her lip, swallowing back the surge of anger and self-doubt that rose within her. She had heard this for weeks now, she had been hearing it since the moment she stepped onto this alien world. But something in her chest tightened, and in that tightness, she found a spark. A spark that she refused to let go out. "You're wrong," Ivy replied, more firmly this time, meeting his gaze head-on. "I'm not afraid, and I'm not weak." Khor-Drak's eyes flickered with a mix of amusement and disbelief. He stepped closer, towering over her, and the other cadets pressed in behind him like a pack of wolves circling their prey. "Prove it," he challenged, his voice low and dangerous. "Show me what you've got. You want respect? You'll have to earn it. Or should I remind you again that humans are nothing but toys to be played with?" A hush fell over the group. Ivy's heart raced in her chest, the words echoing in her mind. Prove it. How? How could she prove anything when she was up against this monstrosity? The odds were insurmountable. But she had no choice. She looked down at her hands, fingers trembling slightly. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was something else. A strange, undeniable resolve settled deep in her bones. This moment, this challenge, was hers to own. "Let's make it official," Khor-Drak said, his grin widening. "A duel. You and me. If you win, I'll leave you alone. But if I win..." He paused for effect, letting the silence drag. "Well, you'll be nothing more than a speck of dust under my boot." Ivy inhaled sharply. A duel. It was a tradition, something the Academy did to settle disputes. But to face Khor-Drak? It was madness. Yet as she looked around at the watching cadets, something in her snapped. She was tired of being a pawn. Tired of being underestimated. She could feel her pulse racing, her hands now steady. "Fine," Ivy said, her voice unwavering. "I accept your challenge." Khor-Drak laughed again, his voice booming through the courtyard. "You'll regret this, Walker." The tension in the air was palpable as the alien cadets stepped back, forming a wide circle around them. Ivy's heart thudded against her ribs, the reality of what she had just agreed to sinking in. She had no combat training, no physical advantages. All she had was her mind, her instincts, and a fire she couldn't quite explain. Khor-Drak's posture shifted. He stood tall and proud, the embodiment of strength. But Ivy didn't back down. She squared her shoulders, locked her gaze on him, and took her first step forward. The Academy's leader, an ancient alien with translucent skin and the wisdom of centuries, stepped into the circle. His voice boomed across the arena, signaling the beginning of the duel. "Cadets, prepare yourselves for the ultimate test of strength and will. May the best warrior win." The countdown began, and Ivy's mind went blank. She had trained for this moment in her mind 1,000 times, imagining what it would feel like to fight back. But now that it was real, the fear was still there, lurking in the back of her mind. 3, 2, 1. Without thinking, Ivy moved. She ducked low, using her agility to slip beneath Khor-Drak's first swipe. He was fast, faster than she anticipated. But Ivy was quicker than he gave her credit for. Her instincts kicked in, and she ducked, dodged, and countered with surprising finesse. The crowd gasped in shock. Khor-Drak was the strongest cadet, the one they all revered, and here was this tiny human, holding her own. For the first time, Ivy felt something shift inside her. It wasn't about strength. It was about will. Khor-Drak, taken off guard, took a step back. And for the first time, Ivy realized she wasn't the underdog. She was the storm. The combat arena was alive with energy. Alien cadets filled the stands, their eyes fixed on the two figures standing in the center. The massive coliseum-like structure, surrounded by tall, black walls, felt as though it had been designed for moments like this, a place where power was tested, where reputations were forged and shattered. Ivy felt the weight of every stare, the sharp scrutiny of those who saw her as nothing more than a spectacle. Her hands were slick with sweat, and her heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her stance firm. She couldn't afford to falter now. The duel was no longer just about Khor-Drak. It was about proving humanity's worth, her worth. Khor-Drak stood opposite her, his cold, reptilian eyes never leaving hers. The crowd's muttering faded as the alien bully stretched his muscles, his dark scales shimmering under the harsh lights. He was confident. Too confident. Ivy could see it in his stance, tall and proud, his every movement a statement of superiority. "You still think you can beat me?" Khor-Drak taunted, his voice like gravel scraping against metal. He cracked his neck, a gesture of utter disdain. "You'll regret this, little human. I'll show you how weak your kind truly is." Ivy didn't respond. Words were pointless now. The challenge had been made, and there was no turning back. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for something much larger. Humanity had always been viewed as inferior, but maybe, just maybe, it was time to show the galaxy they were wrong. The arena's central platform was now clear, and the countdown began, a loud booming voice echoing from the speakers above. 3, 2, 1. Fight! Ivy sprang into action without hesitation. She knew she couldn't match Khor-Drak's sheer strength, but speed was her advantage. She darted to the left, narrowly avoiding Khor-Drak's first strike, a massive fist aimed right at her head. The force of his punch tore through the air, making a sound like a thunderclap, but Ivy was already several steps ahead. Her body moved like water, fluid and quick. Khor-Drak roared in frustration, spinning to face her, his eyes narrowing with anger. The alien's strength was unparalleled, but Ivy had learned to be unpredictable, to use her agility and wit. She weaved in and out, staying just out of reach, her breath shallow but steady. "You're fast," Khor-Drak growled, his eyes flickering with something between amusement and irritation. "But speed won't save you." You'll tire, human. Ivy didn't answer. She couldn't afford to. Instead, she focused on her breathing, her every movement a calculated decision. She feigned left, then pivoted right, barely avoiding another vicious swipe from Khor-Drak's clawed hand. He was powerful, too powerful, but his movements were heavy, predictable. For every punch he threw, Ivy was one step ahead. She ducked, spun, and dodged with a precision that shocked the onlookers. Her body felt light, as though the adrenaline coursing through her veins was giving her the strength to move beyond her physical limits. But she could feel the weight of Khor-Drak's relentless pursuit. With every failed strike, his frustration grew, and it wasn't long before the air seemed to thicken with his anger. He was no longer just fighting her, he was fighting for his pride. And that made him dangerous. Suddenly, he changed tactics. With a snarl, Khor-Drak launched himself forward, grabbing Ivy by the arm with a strength that nearly tore her limb from its socket. The grip was vice-like, and Ivy gasped as she struggled against him, trying to break free. "You're done," Khor-Drak hissed, his face inches from hers. "I'll crush you and put you back in your place." The crowd roared with excitement, but Ivy's thoughts were clear. She wasn't going to let him win, not now, not ever. The fire that had ignited in her chest when she first entered this arena burned brighter now, and she wasn't about to let it go out. With a swift twist of her body, Ivy dropped to the ground, using Khor-Drak's own force against him. She pulled her arm free and kicked his legs out from under him, sending the massive alien crashing to the floor with a thud that reverberated through the arena. The crowd went silent. Khor-Drak growled, his eyes flashing with fury. For the first time, there was a flicker of doubt in his expression. Ivy stood over him, her body coiled with tension, ready for whatever came next. He stood slowly, towering over her once more. His arrogance hadn't been shattered, but Ivy could see the shift in his demeanor. He was no longer just toying with her. This was personal now. "You should have stayed down," Khor-Drak spat, wiping the dirt from his hands. "But now, you've made it worse for yourself." Ivy didn't flinch. She wasn't afraid of his threats anymore. Every second that passed, she grew more confident, more certain of her purpose. She was stronger than he'd ever anticipated, not because of her strength, but because of her resolve. As Khor-Drak lunged forward again, Ivy was ready. She ducked under his attack, using the momentum to spin behind him. In one fluid motion, she planted a kick to his side that sent him stumbling, off balance. She moved again, faster this time, and slammed a fist into his side. It wasn't much, he barely flinched, but it was enough to make him pause. "You're not unbeatable," Ivy said, her voice low but fierce. "I'm not going to stop." The words hung in the air, thick with meaning. Khor-Drak's chest rose and fell as he panted, sweat dripping from his brow. For the first time, he wasn't sure of himself. He'd underestimated her. And now, the tide was beginning to turn. He launched another attack, his claws raking the air, but Ivy anticipated his move, sidestepping and landing a clean punch to his exposed ribcage. The crowd gasped. Ivy was tiring, but the battle wasn't over. She had to keep going. Khor-Drak staggered back, clutching his side, clearly rattled. Ivy's movements slowed, but she kept her focus. She wasn't going to win by overpowering him, she had to outlast him. "You think you can defeat me?" Khor-Drak spat, his voice venomous. "You're only prolonging your failure." Ivy stepped back, her chest heaving. "Maybe. But you're the one who's going to regret underestimating me." The alien's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. This wasn't just a fight for dominance anymore. It was a fight for respect. And in this arena, respect had to be earned. The combat arena was eerily silent as Ivy stood, panting, every muscle in her body aching from the fierce duel. Her vision blurred at the edges, but her mind was as sharp as ever. Khor-Drak had finally staggered back, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead, but the battle was far from over. He was a mountain of alien strength, and Ivy was just a human girl, battered but unbroken. Khor-Drak's pride, now shattered before his fellow cadets, was a dangerous thing. Ivy had seen it in his eyes, she had seen the shift. The cocky confidence that had once marked his every movement had faltered. But the fire in his gaze had only grown more intense. "You're stronger than I thought," Khor-Drak admitted, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "But this ends now." With a roar, he lunged once more, faster than before, his claws slashing the air. Ivy tried to move, but she was slower now, her body protesting with every step. His strike grazed her shoulder, and she stumbled, feeling the heat of the wound radiate through her body. Blood stained her uniform, but it was nothing compared to the fury that surged within her. She couldn't afford to show weakness now. The crowd, which had been holding its breath, erupted into a mix of disbelief and shock. Some cadets had begun to whisper, their voices rising in an excited hum. Ivy was still standing, still fighting. Khor-Drak circled her, his massive frame casting a long shadow over her. "You're out of your depth, human," he sneered. "I'm done playing with you." Ivy's thoughts raced. She had to act fast. She wasn't going to outmatch him physically, she knew that. But there was something else. Something inside her that had been building since the moment she entered this academy. The will to survive, to prove that humanity wasn't just some weak race to be trampled underfoot. As Khor-Drak drew closer, Ivy's mind snapped into focus. She was a strategist. A survivor. Every inch of her being was attuned to his movements, his breathing. She could sense his desperation now, could feel the shift in the energy around them. The alien was trying to finish it. He wanted to crush her under his weight, to remind everyone who the true power was. But Ivy wasn't done yet. Without warning, she dropped to her knees, using the weight of Khor-Drak's attack against him. As he lunged forward, she reached up with surprising speed, grabbing hold of his arm and twisting. His body turned just slightly, just enough to lose his balance. She pulled him down, slamming him to the ground with a force that surprised even her. The crowd gasped. For a moment, Khor-Drak lay there, stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Ivy didn't wait. She pounced, throwing a punch at his chest, landing with a satisfying thud. Her body screamed in protest, but she pushed through. There was no room for hesitation now. "You've underestimated me," Ivy said, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of everything she'd fought for. "I'm not just a human. I'm the one you should fear." Khor-Drak, struggling to regain his bearings, shoved her off and scrambled to his feet, breathing heavily. His face was a mask of rage. His eyes narrowed to slits, and his whole body seemed to tremble with barely contained fury. "You will pay for that," he snarled. "You think you can humiliate me in front of my peers? You will regret this." Ivy, her body aching and bloodied, didn't flinch. Instead, she stood tall, her eyes meeting his with unwavering resolve. "No. You're the one who's going to regret it. You've made a mistake. Humans don't back down. We fight." For a heartbeat, Khor-Drak seemed to hesitate, something flickering in his eyes, a crack in his usually impenetrable mask. But the moment passed, and the fight continued. Ivy could see it now. The cracks in his confidence. Khor-Drak was no longer just an arrogant bully, he was a fighter backed into a corner, and that made him more dangerous. She could feel his every move, his every breath. She had no choice but to keep fighting. She could see the path to victory, but it was narrowing. The crowd was still watching, waiting to see who would emerge as the true victor. The air between them crackled with tension, each of them sizing the other up, each preparing for the next move. Ivy knew she couldn't rely on speed forever. She was growing tired. Her energy was draining with every strike, every dodge. Khor-Drak was still strong, his every move a reminder of why he had been the Academy's top cadet. But there was something more. Something that made Ivy realize the true nature of this fight. This wasn't just about strength. It was about will. About survival. And she wasn't about to lose that. Khor-Drak lunged again, his claws aimed directly for her throat. Ivy ducked, her body protesting the sudden motion, but she didn't miss a beat. She shot her fist forward, connecting with his chest, and in that moment, she saw it, the faintest glimmer of doubt in his eyes. He staggered, just a step, but it was enough. It was all Ivy needed. With one swift movement, she drove her knee into his midsection, knocking the wind from his lungs and sending him crashing to the ground once again. The arena was dead silent. Ivy stood over him, chest heaving, blood dripping from her wounds. She was exhausted, but she wasn't finished. Khor-Drak lay sprawled on the ground, gasping for air, unable to rise. Ivy's eyes narrowed. She wasn't going to kill him. But she wasn't going to let him win either. "Stay down," she said quietly, but with a finality that cut through the tension in the air. "You've lost." The alien cadets watched, stunned into silence. No one had ever dared to challenge Khor-Drak like this. No one had ever made him question his place at the top. For a long moment, Khor-Drak didn't move. Then, slowly, he lifted his head, meeting Ivy's gaze with a look that was neither anger nor contempt, but something far more dangerous, grudging respect. I was wrong about you," he muttered, the words almost lost in the air. And in that instant, Ivy realized something she hadn't expected. This wasn't just about winning the duel. It was about shifting the balance of power, showing that no one was invincible. The arena was still, the air thick with the weight of the moment. Ivy Walker had proven that humans, despite all their perceived weaknesses, could stand toe-to-toe with the greatest of them all. And that was something no alien, no matter how powerful, could ever deny. The arena was still, save for the heavy breathing of two figures standing at its center. The crowd, which had once roared with excitement, was now eerily silent, waiting for a conclusion that they hadn't expected. Ivy Walker, battered and bloodied, stood tall, her gaze locked on Khor-Drak. The alien bully, once unshakable, now lay defeated before her, but something more significant had transpired. Ivy's chest heaved, each breath an effort as she took a step back. The fight was over, but the weight of what had just happened settled over her like a blanket. She wasn't sure whether to feel elated or terrified. This victory wasn't just hers. It was humanity's. But at what cost? Khor-Drak slowly pushed himself off the ground, his body stiff with the shock of defeat. He stood in front of her, his face bloodied and bruised, but the arrogance hadn't entirely left his posture. He stared at her, eyes still burning with the fierce anger he had felt since the beginning of this challenge. But now, there was something more, a grudging respect, like the flicker of a flame that had finally found its equal. "You've done it," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "You've won." Ivy didn't say anything at first. She could feel the eyes of the entire academy on her, each cadet waiting for her to speak, to confirm her victory. But she wasn't here for their applause. She wasn't here for their respect. She was here because she needed to prove that humans weren't weak, that they weren't expendable. She needed to prove that humanity had a place in this galaxy, a place that no alien could take away. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady, her words deliberate. "I didn't just win. We all did." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, it seemed as though the weight of the truth had finally hit everyone in the arena. The alien cadets, who had been watching with amusement or indifference, shifted uncomfortably. Khor-Drak's eyes flickered with something akin to doubt. They weren't just witnessing a human beating one of their own, they were witnessing the reality of what Ivy's presence in the academy meant. "I've shown you what we can do," Ivy continued, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "I didn't fight because I wanted to prove I'm better than you. I fought because I wanted you to understand that humans have more to offer than you realize. We're more than a stepping stone. We're here to stay." Her words were met with an eerie stillness. Ivy knew that some cadets still saw her as a curiosity, a token human brought in to be tested and dismissed. But now, in this moment, they were seeing her in a new light. Her victory wasn't just a physical one, it was a psychological one. She had shattered the perception that humans were weak and inferior, and that was a battle she had fought harder than any of them could ever imagine. Khor-Drak's expression softened slightly, though his pride still burned beneath the surface. "You've made your point, Walker," he said, his voice quieter now, no longer dripping with mockery. But this isn't over. Ivy's eyes narrowed, her stance unwavering. You'll never get another chance to prove me wrong. There was no anger in her voice, no hatred. Just cold determination. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that this was only the beginning. She had earned her place here, and she wouldn't let anyone take it away. Not now. Not ever. The crowd's murmur rose, a hum of whispers that filled the arena. The headmaster, an ancient being with translucent skin and a voice that carried centuries of wisdom, stepped forward, his long, slender fingers tapping against the air as he summoned silence. He looked down at Ivy, his expression unreadable. Cadet Walker, he began, his voice commanding attention. What you have done today will be remembered. Not just by your peers, but by all who witness your actions. You have proven yourself, not through brute force, but through something far more powerful, your will. Ivy's eyes widened slightly. She wasn't sure what to expect, but this wasn't it. The headmaster's words, spoken with a weight that seemed to carry across the stars, made her stomach tighten. Your victory today, he continued, has changed things. But it is not the end of your journey. It is only the beginning. There will be those who challenge you. Those who will question your place here. But you have earned something far more important than respect. You have earned their fear. Fear. The word echoed in her mind, and for the first time since stepping foot on this alien planet, Ivy felt a surge of something she hadn't expected, power. Not the power to defeat her enemies, but the power to shape her own destiny. The power to change the course of her future, and perhaps humanity's future as well. The headmaster turned to the rest of the cadets, his voice sharp. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Strength is not defined by size or race. Strength is defined by the will to overcome. And Cadet Walker has demonstrated that will better than any of us. Ivy stood straighter, a flicker of pride stirring within her. The headmaster's approval was not something she had expected, but it felt like the first true acknowledgement she had ever received in this academy. The crowd, once divided, now seemed to shift. Some cadets who had once looked down on Ivy began to shift in their seats, their gazes lingering on her with newfound respect. The alien cadets who had once mocked her now saw her as a force to be reckoned with. She wasn't just a human girl fighting for survival. She was a cadet, a warrior in her own right, one who had proven that humanity's place in this galaxy was earned, not given. Khor-Drak, still bruised and defeated, stood silently to the side. His pride would never fully recover from the humiliation, but there was no denying the respect that lingered in his eyes. Ivy hadn't just won a duel, she had won the galaxy's perception of humanity. And that was a victory that would resonate long after the last cadet left the arena. Get up, Ivy said, her voice quiet but firm as she glanced at Khor-Drak. There's no need to lay there and take it. For a moment, he simply stared at her, but then, with a reluctant grunt, he stood. The fight had been exhausting, but Ivy knew that it was far from over. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. But this moment, this victory, was hers. And for the first time since arriving at the academy, Ivy felt something she hadn't before, hope. Ask ChatGPT.